Hello and welcome to Game 16 of TCEC's 15th Superfinal, played between Stockfish and Leela Chess 0. In this game, Leela is white and they started out with e4, g6, d4 and bishop g7, and we got ourselves a modern defense. This is also called the Robach defense. Now, why is this modern? Well, because it follows the hyper-modern philosophy of chess openings, which in contrast to more traditional more classical openings, states that in order to have central control, one doesn't necessarily need to occupy the center with pawns, as white did here. Is enough to control the center from the sides with pieces. And black's purpose is to bring down white's center by attacking it with the fianchettoed bishops, with the knights, with the flank pawns, c5 and f5, and even with the central pawns. And if black succeeds in collapsing white's center, then he will have a huge positional advantage and very good winning chances. The game continued with knight c3, d6, and this is now the end of the book. And in this position, Leela chose the very aggressive f4, the Pseudo-Austrian attack. Stockfish played now knight c6, attacking d4, bishop e3, a6, knight f3, and now b5. Probably with the intention of playing b4 and reducing white's control of the light squares in the center. Bishop d3, knight f6, and of course in this position Leela played the very strong e5 move, driving this knight away from his ideal f6 square. Now the knight definitely doesn't want to go home because that would be just losing time. He doesn't want to go to d7 either because it would block this bishop's view of this diagonal. He can't go to the central squares because white has very good control of them. Going to h5 is not good either because the knight can't go to f4, and actually knight h5 is a blunder because after bishop e4 black is in trouble. White is attacking this knight, which cannot move because it's pinned to the rook, and moves like bishop b7 or bishop d7 doesn't really help, because after g4 this bishop is overloaded. Bishop e4 is a double attack on c6 and on the g4 square, and this knight on h5 will be lost. So after e5, Stockfish played the only move knight g4, attacking this bishop on e1. Leela retreated the bishop, and now she's threatening to expand with h3 and g4 with the tempo on the knight. Stockfish would like to get in here h5 to stop the expansion, because after h3 and knight h6 he would have a very good grip on the g4 square, and g4 can't happen. And if g4 doesn't happen, then black also have the f5 square for one of his pieces. Unfortunately for Stockfish, this doesn't work because of the same bishop e4, and after something like bishop b7, white would have e6, undermining the g6 pawn, and after black takes and bishop g6 check, king d7 and knight g5, white has ideas like queen takes on h5 and queen e2 attacking the e6 pawn, and white is better. Or alternatively, after e6, if instead of taking black would play f5, then this is even worse, because after bishop takes on c6, bishop takes, d5, bishop back and knight h4, the g6 pawn cannot be defended and black's position is just horrible. So after bishop g1, since h3 and g4 is really threatening and h5 as we saw doesn't work, Stockfish had to come up with something fast, and he invented the move knight b4, attacking this very strong light squared bishop. And after bishop e4 he could even get in d5 since the knight is defending the d5 square. And after bishop d3 he took the bishop, c takes on d3 and now h5, h3 and knight h6. And as I mentioned, black has a very good grip on g4, stopping g4, and he also has the f5 square for one of his pieces. But all this maneuvering came with a concession because Leela has now the semi-open c5 to work with, and c5 and c6 are weak squares in black's camp. Leela now continued with bishop f2, Developing this bishop to e3 doesn't make so much sense, because after knight f5, this bishop would have to go back to f2 anyway to guard the g3 square. So after bishop f2, c6, queen d2, a5, rook c1, queen d7, and Leela is one move away to complete her development, but since the position is closed, castling is not that urgent, and since b4 is coming anyway, Leela preferred to improve this knight by transferring it to e3, where it fights for the f5 square. So they continued with knight d1, b4, knight d3, queen b7, rook c5, very good move, attacking in all directions, knight f5, and now before taking out the knight, Leela castles, rook a6, lateral defense on the c6 pawn, knight takes on f5, bishop takes on f5, and now Leela played queen e3, kind of preventing castling for black. If Stockfish would now castle, then the problem for him is this knight h4 move attacking the f5 square. And if the bishop would move away, then f5 could come and Leela would get in a nice kingside attack. Or alternatively, if Stockfish would choose to keep the bishop on f5 and defend it with the queen, then Leela could continue her attack with queen e2, looking at g4, and after something like a4 she could take out the bishop, and now after bishop h4, allowing this rook to defend f4, g4 and f5 is coming, and white gets in a huge kingside attack. So instead of castling after queen e3, Stockfish played instead queen d7, and after bishop e1, probably preventing a4, queen b7, king h2 and a4, Leela continued with bishop h4, and now Stockfish played bishop g4, going for some tactics. Now, accepting the bishop is not beneficial to Leela, because after h takes and h takes, black has two pieces attacked, and after something like g3, pawn takes and queen takes, the position is just equal. So instead of taking the bishop, Leela played knight g1, and after bishop f5 she went to knight e2, going for g3 and attacking the f5 square again. Getting in f5 is Leela's dream at this point. The game continued with bishop c8, knight g3, bishop h6, pinning the pawn to the queen so that it cannot advance, queen e2, king f8. Now getting in f5 still doesn't work because of g5 trapping this bishop. So instead, Leela played now king h1, and after rook h7, which looks very funny on h7, but Stockfish wanted to keep it on the h file in case Leela gets in g4. Leela now played queen e3. She wants to open the f file one way or the other, and her idea now is to break the pin with bishop g5 and then get in f5. Rook a8, bishop g5, and now avoiding the exchange with bishop g7 is not very good for black because f5 comes anyway. And after bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes and rook takes, Leela has a nice attack. And alternatively, after bishop g5, playing, let's say, e6, preventing f5, doesn't work because after bishop takes, rook takes, Leela would still get in f5 thanks to this attack on the rook. And after something like king g7, f takes g6, f takes and queen g5, white gets again a very big attack with ideas like rook f6 and knight h5. So not having much choice, after bishop g5, Stockfish took the bishop, but now the f file opens up. a3 trying to open something, but Leela closes down with b3, bishop e6, and now since the configuration of the pawns changed after f takes on g5, this knight on g3 doesn't stand very well, so Leela is improving it by going to f4 via e2. And on f4 this knight would stand very well. It would attack the e6 square, the g6 square, and also the d5 and h5 squares. Also, Leela transfers both rooks to the c file to put maximum pressure on the c6 pawn. So the game continued with knight e2, king g7, queen c1, rook c8, queen d2, bishop f5, rook c1, rook h8, and now knight f4. And in this position, Stockfish felt compelled to play h4, introducing a new weakness in the position in the form of the h4 pawn. But the truth is that he didn't have an easy time going in this position because Leela is threatening to play e6 and break open the position when the time is right, and apparently Stockfish couldn't find a better way to stop that plan. If he would play e6, then after some moves like g3, king g2, king f3 and g4, this bishop would be lost. And if instead of e6 he would play bishop e6 to stop the pawn from going forward, then Leela could increase the pressure on the c6 pawn with queen c2, forcing this bishop back to d7, and then she would still get in e6 at some point when the time is right. So Stockfish's idea after knight f4 and h4 was that he wants to play e6 and then there's no g3, g4 winning this bishop because he can take with the h-pawn. But now after h4, Leela is changing plans and she goes for the h4 pawn. She wants to transfer the knight to f3 and the queen to f4, and then with those two pieces win down h4. So the game continued with knight e2, queen d7, knight g1, queen b7, knight f3, and just before the queen could get to f4, Stockfish stops that plan with queen a6, double attacking the d3 pawn. Now Leela could go to queen b4 and allow Stockfish to take on d3, but as we know, Leela doesn't like counterplay, and she prefers to defend temporarily the pawn on d3 with the knight from e1. And since she really wants the h4 pawn, and the only way to get it is with the knight from f3 and the queen on f4, she needs other two pieces guarding d3, and so she comes up with the plan of defending d3 with the king from e2 and this rook from d2. But after queen b6 defending the b4 pawn, she makes an attempt at winning the b4 pawn with knight c2. Maybe Stockfish is not paying attention. Fortune favors the bold, they say. But after rook b8, of course, the knight had to go back to e1 and Leela had to continue her plan. And after some moves in this position, as we can see, the queen and the knight are in position to take the pawn, and the rook and the king are defending d3. So Leela now took on h4, and after king e8, she again came up with a new plan. And the new plan is to put maximum pressure on the c6 pawn by moving both rooks to the c file and transfer this knight back to f4. And after some even more moves in this position, where black's life is not easy at all, white has a lot of pressure on both e6, c6, d5, g6, and has even ideas of invading with the rooks, Stockfish went for a queen exchange, and Leela accepted, and once more it's time for a new plan. Leela wants now to advance the kingside pawns up the board as far as possible, held by the king, and then move both rooks to the f file to put maximum pressure on f7, e6 and g4. And after about 40 moves trying to realize that plan, we get to move 109, where in this position, as you can see, the rooks are in position to attack f7, and Stockfish felt the need to change the structure again with c5. But after d takes, king takes and rook f4, the b4 pawn is even weaker than c6 was. c6 was at least defended by the bishop on d7. But it's hard to blame Stockfish's moves because his position was busted anyway. If he would choose to sit on his position and instead of playing c5, let's say play king b5, then Leela has this plan of coming with the king to f4 to defend both g4 and g5, put this rook to h1 and play h5, h6 and win. For example, king g3, king b6, king f4, and now let's say the rooks go to the h file to stop h5 coming. Rook h8, rook h1, rook h7. But the point is that h5 still works because after h takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, Leela would have this very nice rook h6 move, basically forcing the win. The rook either has to take on g5 or take the rook, and then black loses because this pawn promotes. So after c5, d takes, king takes, and rook f4, Leela has a new target in the b4 pawn, and she also has the c file to work with. And after some more moves, we get to this position where, as we can see, the black king is separated from the b4 pawn, and Leela has ideas like knight e1, knight c2, and winning the pawn on b4. And if black tries to chase the rook off with king b6, then this exchange, rook takes, king takes on c5, and rook takes on b8, is beneficial to Leela. She has just another passed pawn. So after rook c5, Stockfish just gave up on the b4 pawn and he played bishop b5, rook b4, and now after some more moves we get to this position where Leela plays now b4 and attacks a3. But Stockfish just gives up on the a pawn, also plays rook h8, and after rook takes on a3, rook back, rook c3, rook a8, and a3, these pawns are just winning for Leela. After some more moves, we get into this position where, in order to exchange a pair of rooks, Leela gives up the a pawn. Now bishop takes is not good because the bishop is in a pin, and after b5 it would be lost. But after a4, Stockfish took with the rook, rook takes, bishop takes, and now Leela played h5. Taking twice on h5 doesn't work because after rook f7, this pawn is going in. So after h5, Stockfish played bishop c6, and now h6, and Leela has a new protected passed pawn. And the game continued, and in this position Leela now played b5. Taking with the bishop doesn't work because of rook b1, pinning the bishop and winning it. And after bishop e8, the game was finally ended in favor of Leela. So in conclusion, Leela managed to force Stockfish to take the light square bishop and allow a semi-open c file for white. And thanks to the simultaneous pressure on the c file and the king side, Stockfish allowed the second weakness, the h4 pawn, and from there on it was just good old Leela grinding out a win. A great game. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other videos. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.